My name is Cynthia Kischinchand, and for breakfast I had orange juice followed by English muffin with tea made with tea leaves, thanks to my husband.
Sounds very good. Okay, we're good with sound. This is
Okay.
just right. So let's start with 1995. Talk about um, how you discovered PHS in tree tenders.
Very likely, I read an article in our local monthly newspaper, The Falser, and learned about it. And when I went to sign up, I realized somehow I learned that two neighbors, this was the fall course of 95, two neighbors, one whom I knew slightly and one whom I didn't know, um, they had taken the course in the spring and wanted to start a tree tender group. So they got the information out in the local newspaper, and a group of us uh, took the course. And so that's how that began. Excuse me. And then he is still associated with Philly U, but he is not living in East Falls anymore. And that's Lloyd Russo. And then the woman, Sally Mazer, unfortunately died a number of years ago. But in 96, we were having a meeting sitting around a table, and Alexis, who's in the picture there, she's with McMichael Park, heavily involved. And kind of sort of by default, I became, quote unquote, the coordinator, because I said with a group this small, not a president, a coordinator. And I'd be more than happy to pass the reins, but people have moved, people have a lot of other obligations. So that has not happened. But I think with the group and the level of involvement that we have from several people, I see the group continuing. And one of my feelings has been, and this, my experience with when I worked for the Friends of the Free Library, is I used to tell volunteers, you're not in competition with another volunteer group. So, like in our case, if one last year we planted 5 trees in the spring, 6 in the fall. One year we did 66. This Saturday we're doing 26. And so it's better that the group does 5 trees and has a planting and people aren't overextended than you say, well, we always planted X number of trees. So, and with people who are newer to the group and people from the beginning, uh, they're a very, I don't want to say savvy, but sensible group of people and understand. I mean, they have life experience in other arenas, so they understand about what you take on. And that's, I think, and I feel it's the same with other groups across the city because I'm on the tree committee downtown.
Well, tell me what, besides the fact that you knew some neighbors, why did you want to spend your time this way? You had a lot of other activities going on, responsibilities. Why this?
Well, I was fortunate enough to grow up with a large backyard, and I actually slept under the apple tree that summer when I was born. And I realized probably one of the first things I saw as a child were leaves. I played under that apple tree. I had to clean up the apples under the apple tree so they wouldn't squish. When my father went to mow, my mother taught me they're gnarly apples, but I can make applesauce out of it. So I never had science, but I had that. And then I walked home from school all seasons of the year. There was one house that had beautiful vine, and it reminded me of lilacs, but they weren't lilacs. I knew that. Well, I learned later it was wisteria. And then when I moved to D.C., I was very fortunate. I lived in Georgetown, and Dumbarton Gardens was free. I have pictures of the daffodils from Dumbarton Gardens. And so I wouldn't have said, oh, I need this connection to nature on a regular basis. Oh, and that's also deciding what college I went to. I visited, it was going to be the Boston University or Douglas, which has a beautiful campus, and went up to Boston. I'd been there, but as I say to people, you're there for 4 years, not 4 weeks. And it was in the winter. And I thought, I love cities, but this isn't how I want to wake up every morning. This isn't how I want to go to classes. And then when I saw Douglas, and I always said my first spring there was like in Wizard of Oz when it goes from black and white to color, because see, we didn't have dogwood trees in Connecticut. And the lilacs bloomed earlier, everything bloomed earlier, and we went to school until June. And so I could, as I matured, I realized this is part of who I am, and it's a good part. I mean, it's healthy for me. And so when it came to here, and again, being selfish, the old story, as I say to young people, trees and people don't live forever. And because I knew enough about the city finances, I wasn't going to fault the mayor and the city council because they couldn't provide, 2,000 trees a year to be planted. I mean, that part of me, I had that awareness. And the other thing I learned from the library group that I started, when I started that, I ended up meeting neighbors that I had never met and interacted with. And so I saw the plus on that, and I saw it in terms of making new neighbors feel welcome. Because sometimes people say, well, people have lived here for 30 or more years and set in their ways and whatnot and aren't open to new ideas. So it was a combination of things. And then the other thing, I would not have stayed with it, though. However much I like the mission and the goals, if there were not the kind of relationship that you have with PHS staff, and I'm talking past staff and former staff. They are astounding, and again, we're not the only tree tender group in the city, but in terms of listening to you and doing their best to anticipate what you need and then asking you what you need. I mean, they step back and look at themselves in terms of what they're doing and how they're doing it. And as I said, with past and current staff, I've had that experience, and my peers agree with me. I say to people when they retire, never let your passport expire. Don't sign your life over to volunteer work for 6 months. But all of my peers, I have a sister in her 80s who's a volunteer in Connecticut with plants and libraries. And if the process isn't pleasant, find another project to work on, because in the long run, you're not going to be as productive. Never mind, you might get an Excedrin headache or grind your teeth at night. So that's the other side of it. I would have, no matter how much I enjoy it, the neighborhood level of it, if without PHS, and I will say also now the relationship with Parks and Recreation, because I go back a long time with them now, and understanding the limits that they have. And then people, again, have to understand that these trees are under the jurisdiction of the city. It's not the one going in your backyard, and be respectful of that. And, so it's been a very, very good experience, and they give me a long leash.
Cynthia, tell me a little bit more about the relationship with PHS. You said former and present. Mm-hmm. Talk about that relationship.
Okay, well, it began with tree tender training with Mindy. And then Jane Goldenberg was the head, I believe.
Jane Golden?
No. I'm trying to, the name of the person who was head of it. Okay. But in terms of, I said, of the organization and the accessibility, and they're being realistic as to what our limits were, but also, and again, maybe it's because I'm married to somebody, who's an engineer, but the whole issue of the personal safety aspect. And for instance, they have tree planting crew leader training, like you take your tree tender training, but they provide crew leader training. And I've met with some of our members. They want to be sort of an assistant crew leader. Not that they don't have the skills having to do how to plant a tree the right way, but they don't like having to be in charge of that group and telling the individuals how to do it. And so having that. And then the other thing was okay, you plant the tree and there are all these little branches crisscrossing, might need pruning. Well, what did PHS do? They started the pruning clubs for tree tenders, and they had a template, in the beginning. As we started, your first time around, they had funding, so we could go to, I forget the store, but we could go to a supply place and get $50 worth of tools. See, it's being the nuts and bolts, and giving you enough time to do it. It isn't like, well, you have 3 days to go and use that coupon. And then and then when you went out the first time, or that first summer, maybe you went out 3 times, you had a certified arborist with you. And in terms of information and telling people that were coming out to do the recently planted street trees, you prune them after they've been there a year or more, is that if a person for some reason doesn't want their tree pruned, they can say, no, please don't prune my tree. And we've never had that experience, but they really think ahead, and you're not caught in a conundrum as, oh, what do I do now? They seem to anticipate, and if there is something that you don't think you understand, they want you to ask the question. And so they had then a tree pruning workshop, and then they had an advanced tree pruning workshop. And with that, and I felt they should, even though I hate taking tests, we had to take a test. But that was the right way to go about it. It made you be honest with yourself. Do you really have the knowledge to be an advanced tree tender pruner? And, so yeah, I feel, as I said, so with Mindy and like now, no, I'm not going to remember the names of the Plant 1 Million leader in the past, but with Dana, who's been there several years now, Dana Dentries, I felt, even before I saw it at the Navy Yard when we went to tag trees, I felt there's a team there. There is a team there. And I feel, and then Glenn Abrams, who is at PHS, I forget his title now. Well, he was with the water department, and I knew him slightly. He taught a course at Philly U, and we had a wonderful relationship with a professor there, Rosa Gertis, who's retired, who taught the mandatory freshman environmental one-semester class. And so that's how we got connected for tree tenders. And I believe that was through PHS suggesting we approach. And I would go into the classroom, explain, I always say, is who we are and who we aren't, because our group is not a 501c3, show the video, and explain about the, we wear closed-toed shoes, bring your water, we'll supply the tools, we'll feed you afterwards. But having that opportunity, and I'm going to go back, I had the tools I needed, i.e. that video. And so they always seem to be one step ahead of what would need to do something. And you can say, well, that's at the staff level, but you have to have the people upstairs saying, yes, that's a good use of funds, is to do this or to do that. And that's what I've seen at PHS. I mean, I can't tell you exactly who makes which decision for what. No, and I shouldn't. But that way I do. And I'll give you an example. Is one of the big challenges getting the trees picked up. And we were very lucky for a number of years. Laurel Hill Cemetery, well, we had to raise our own money for the trees. This was before Tree Vitalized. See, we go back a long time. And get a grant, and they were balled and burlap trees that would be delivered to the cemetery. And these 2 men unloaded those 200-pound trees, then loaded them up to the truck. And then I followed the truck through East Falls as they unloaded the trees. And then when we got into the whole Tree Vitalized program, where we have the opportunity twice a year because of the state funding and other funding, that we don't have to pay for the trees. And thank heavens, you do know about Nina Bassuk, don't you? Oh, She's one of my heroes. We have the bare root trees that weigh 10 pounds. And the fact that PHS, I'm going to say, was ahead of the curve because they realize it's not only easier, it's safer for the volunteers, whatever age they are, whether they're 6 feet tall or 5'2", the lighter the tree, the better. And also the fact that a bare root tree has a better start in life because it has at least 80% of its tree root. So they start off much better. But that was something that came out of Cornell, a woman, Professor Nina Basak. But PHS did their homework, and I believe they went up and met with her. She did a pilot project. They studied it, and that's the thing. The fact that they go step by step, and I'm mixing metaphors, but the proof is in the pudding. It pays to go at that rate. I mean, rather than charging ahead. So seeing that with PHS. Oh, so I started to mention Glenn Abrams. He taught a course over there. I went to his class, and he was still working with the water department, and he came out and helped planted trees. Well, now he's had, I forget the exact title, but he's above Mindy, and there are other projects under him. But he himself has that firsthand experience. See, that's what I'm saying about the staff there. Even if they have moved up or came in at a certain level, they have that firsthand experience, and it's invaluable. Oh, and I'll just give you, so about the tree delivery. Well, a woman who unfortunately died of Lou Gehrig's ALS, Joy Lawrence, she knew that we had the Queen Lane treatment plant over here, which is where the trucks were for certain water department projects connected with trees and what they're doing. And she contacted me, and she said, Cynthia, what if the water department picked up the trees at the Navy Yard for you and delivered them? And I said, I mean, it's a good thing I was sitting down. And so I said, absolutely. And I with my husband, now he had retired maybe he hadn't retired at that point. See, I kept my distance in the water department but there was a PHS person, and it wasn't as if Joy Lawrence herself lived in East Falls. However, she knew about that. And it's never as if I ever said, I don't know how we're going to get the trees. But they're very creative people, and they follow through. So I feel very fortunate. I feel what I say to many people. I don't want to imagine what Philadelphia and the region would be like without PHS, because I have been to other cities and talked with other people, and it is astounding. It is astounding. So.
This is great. I love it's fine that it's kind of stream of consciousness because you're telling wonderful stories.
Well, the other thing is that with our group, and the woman is in, I showed you that photograph.
Picture,
yeah. Okay. This is the lady who started our Arbor Day celebration. She had, I was head of the group then. It was spring '96. And her husband of 70 years died in January at the age of 95. She has a pacemaker. This other woman who took tree tender training a couple of years ago, by the way, and that's Lloyd Russo, who was, I said, one of the founders. We talked privately and said, well, we're going to leave it to Alice what she feels she can handle. And she has a very supportive family, so, I mean, they were concerned about something. So she, in January, started the planning for our 23rd Arbor Day celebration, which is the longest continuous Arbor Day celebration in the city of Philadelphia. But that's thanks to partnerships. And Parks and Recreation is our sponsor, which is a very big deal because you're talking about liability. You're talking about setting up the podium and the speakers. bringing the tables because they have all these activities for the children. And it's all because of Alice. And this year our event is, we moved it to May, having to do with weather and testing. And it's a good thing we did, because Arbor Day is the day before this week's planning. I mean, it's the last Friday, or it's the following Friday. It's the last Friday of the month. And it was made a federal holiday by President Richard Nixon in 1970. And then, Julius Sterling Morton established the first Arbor Day, I think, in 1852 in Nebraska. But getting back to this has been a wonderful outreach. St. Bridget's School is now closed, but that was the local parochial school. Then we have Thomas Mifflin, named after the first governor, who once had a house here in East Falls that was torn down. And so you have Thomas Mifflin, and that is a school with a big cement playground. Oh, and by the way, we've planted 22 trees around the school over the years. And then we have Penn Charter, which is private, and then we now have Wissahickon Charter, which is a public charter school. Well, I got all the confirmations, and we will have the 2 first grades from Penn Charter, the 2 from Wissahickon Charter, and then the first and second grades from Mifflin. And every class does a song or a poem. We have water department is there with an activity. We have different activities. They bring their lunches, and we provide juice and cookies and clementines. And Pam DeLisio, I think if she had to come in on she's our state rep, on a parachute to be there, she would. Yeah, when we started it, I learned from Michael Nutter, former mayor, who was a councilman, at a meeting. And he said to me, a group of us sitting around the table, "Cynthia, I can't know what's going on unless you tell me." So everybody on city council, I will get an email from me about the tree planting on Saturday, and also the mayor, and also the state reps and state senator. And when we do Arbor Day, it's sort of what I call the open invitation. I mean, if we want someone specifically, that's different. But it is just an FYI. And then the other thing, I'll be going for my 21st Philadelphia Activities Fund grant. And that money is so Mifflin students can either go to nature centers or have a program in the classroom. And I send a letter to the principal with places listed, and say on the listing, if there's some place you would like to go to but I've never heard of, let me know. So for instance, I had never heard of Wagner Free Institute. I never had heard of Insectarium. I never heard of Steyer Orchard. I never heard of Solly Brothers Farm. And so children have been going, and I get a small grant from our community council, and write the check to the school, and they go on these trips, and I have the fun of being a chaperone. But to see children and their teacher reveling in the glory of Morris Arboretum, and you just can't put a price on it. You can't put a price on it. And then sometimes I've gotten, for different trips they've done, I get thank you notes. And then what I would do with the and you can turn it over. With the thank you notes, I do use that I would get, that in the summer I'd put them in an envelope and take them into the city councilman's office so he could see for himself. Because I find, experience something directly yourself is different than someone saying, "Oh, I got a sweet thank you note." So, so that part of it has been wonderful. And then talking about support, and then I realized it's creating community awareness. And Alice had the idea of every child leaving with a plant. Well, last year and this year it's Mother's Day weekend, and Sue Park, a retired high school chemistry teacher, had the idea last year to have fabric, and she would cut the fabric, with the zigzag, and the child could pick out the plant, goes in a paper cup, pick out the piece of fabric and the ribbon, and then it ties it up, and it's got a Mother's Day. The child has a Mother's Day present.
You're doing that this year?
Yes, we are. In fact, the teachers ask us, and I said, yes, we're doing it, but please don't tell the children, because it's always a new group of children. And then I felt the teachers go through so much to prepare the children, permission slips, the bus. So I've been able to get a grant from one of the banks. One bank gave the money for the plants, another bank for the books. And so every year I pick out a book. And last year, one book, Philadelphia. And I don't know if you know this book, but it could be in any park in any city the way it is done. And then one year, I like birthdays. I don't know why, 'cause I'm 77, but anyway. It was Audubon's birthday, and of course birds live in trees. So this was the book for the teachers. And then I came across this book. I saw it on Amazon. Well, the illustrator, Tom Leonard, is a Philadelphian in South Philly. And in fact, his street is Alden Street. Sounds like a tree. And he teaches, I believe, at the University of the Arts. And so my good husband, after I got the books, we went down to South Philly, and he autographed every book. And I'm involved with Mifflin School and reading, and in each case, I haven't done this one, but I like to get the reaction of the children, because I might think children would love it, but the final test is you reading it to a child or the child reading the book. And then this one is Freeing the Birds, and I actually have not seen the book, but I know the artist, who is a former Falzer, but who is a chemist in the water department lab, and mother of children. And and she did both the story and the illustrations. And so she's actually going to be at Arbor Day. And what we do is, in the past, the president of the bank has come. We have him call out the name of each teacher, and she gets the book. And so we'll do it this time. And then the teacher can go over to the table and have it autographed by the... And the first time we did the books, and the teacher's name was called out, she came up, the children applauded. When does a teacher ever get applause? Yeah. So, I mean, and no, we didn't, quote unquote, plan that. It just grew, pardon the pun, it grew out of it. Then the other thing I've used...
Let me just stop you for a minute. This is so amazing, and I just have to ask a few questions.
Yeah, do.
So, how did this evolve, and what's PHS's role in
Oh,
this?
very good, very good. Okay, well, with PHS, we have the tree tender training. And if you're not already, if you're a member, if your neighborhood has a group, you are then connected to that group. If the neighborhood does not have a group, tree tender PHS then will give you guidance and information on how to start a group. And now that I think about it, if I remember correctly, and Mindy can confirm this, but I think I've had people refer to me so I could do a little walkthrough as to how we do it. And for instance, some groups are a committee of their civic association, which means it's a 501c3. So they're a member of that. I think something like UC Green in West Philly, that is a totally independent nonprofit, which is the program. And they get a lot of support from Penn, which is it's like everybody wins. So PHS if your neighborhood does not have a group, PHS lets you know what the options are. And so you can decide, do you want to see if you want to partner with your RCO? And we started out independently with Sally and Lloyd. And as I said, we're a very small group. And one of the things that I became aware of from getting the Philadelphia Activities Fund grant, I can, as a tree tender group, we can apply for the grant. If we were a committee of our civic, our civic association can only get one grant. So if we were a committee of that, it's possible another committee, like we have Friends of Mifflin. Friends of Mifflin would want to apply. So we retain our independence that way and getting the grant. And with the small that group that we have with the dynamics, people are comfortable with the way it is, which the way we are. It doesn't mean we'll never become part. Maybe 5 years from now, things will change, and they'll say, I think it's better we become part of the civic. But this is where PHS walks you through all this and lets you understand what your options are, and then how to go about it.
And tell me who Sally and Lloyd are. What are their names?
Sally Mazer. In fact, it's on there. And I didn't realize when I did the brochure how as life went on, it would help me because and in there, well, also for the new members, like, well, who founded the group? How many trees have we planted? Yeah, so their names are down there as founding the group. Yeah, Sally, I don't know, she was in her 50s or 60s, and she went after her children were grown and got herself a degree in landscaping and did landscaping. She did the property next door 15, 20 years ago. And then Lloyd at the university, and I'll be honest, I forget what he taught, but now I believe he's administration. But so they were the ones who started it. And as I said, I knew of Sally and knew her slightly, and I knew her. I'm sorry. I started the Friends of the Free Library. Sally ultimately started the garden at the library after the Friends group started, and I mean with a garden committee, and then she ultimately became president of the Friends group. So there's all this connection, and then I forget how many years ago Lloyd and his wife moved out of East Falls. But so I understand he wouldn't be involved in a group; it'd be involved with wherever he's living now.
So it was through them that you.
They formed the group. Yep. This photograph. Okay, they had a meeting in this. I'm going to say Lloyd he and Sally took it that spring. And if I remember correctly, there was a meeting that summer of interested people. And again, the word got out because of the local newspaper. And the meeting was over at, now it's Jefferson. And then all of the folks that you see in the picture, signed up to take the course. And so we took the course that October.
What was the course like?
Well, you learn the ABCs of trees and learning, I'll say, the status of a street tree. And because I was married to someone that knew about laterals and all that, I understood about planting the right tree in the right place. And we learned basics, but they're crucial. And in fact, I'm going to be meeting a neighbor today to mark the spots for her 2 trees for Saturday. And has to be 30 feet from the corner. Makes sense for safety. Has to be 15 feet from, I think, a light pole. A certain number of feet from a fire hydrant. All of these make sense in terms of the utilities, but in the long run, it makes sense for the health of the tree because it's less likely to get hit when they have to use the fire, or injured when there's the fire hydrant that has to be used, or work on the light pole. I mean, it's where, from whatever perspective, but I said from the utilities perspective or from someone who cares about trees, that's the right decision. And so we learned about that, and then also about species. And for years, this whole issue of the ginkgo. So again, the right tree in the right place. And for instance, we're going to be planting 2 trees on Henry Avenue, and very busy, almost like a highway, and the strip isn't all that wide. Columnar trees are going in, rather than trees that are going to branch out and get hit by the trucks that shouldn't be on Henry. But we learned that, and then I still know him. One of my teachers, they have a variety of teachers. So one of your teachers is a professional arborist. I mean, Hal Rosner, he was with Bartlett, now he's with Schechtel. And so you had that person out there who had been doing it. And then the other thing is, I don't know if you say the biology of a tree, but I didn't know about trunk flare. I'd never noticed trunk flare. And you need to know about trunk flare. And so learning how to really look at a tree. So you have the instructions, you watch the video, but then there's the point that you dug the hole and you're holding the tree and you put it in and whoops, it's going to be too low. So you take it out and you fill the hole part way. And then the other thing, again, with the planting, I still remember, now this I do remember, we went out and planted a tree as part of the class, which makes sense. Again, you have all the videos and all of that. So their sequence of giving you the information, and I felt they did not go too fast. And people absorbed it. They had a chance to ask a question. And so I really felt, yeah, I think I can get involved with this. I'll be able to do it the right way. And if I'm not sure, yes, I'll ask the question. And so that process, and as I said, going back to it, that it was in 2013 that they started that pruning. And my fellow tree tenders here in the neighborhood are thrilled with that because they know the city cannot come out and check every tree that's been planted in the last 5 years in Philly by tree tenders and themselves for that matter. And so that has really, really worked well. I mean, again, everybody wins. The other thing that I have found with it and going out, I tend to have our brochure with us, and it's sort of who we are and who we aren't, but to let the people know, like, what are you doing to that tree? Who are you? I mean, with a neighbor, and so they understand that we're not just some, tree huggers who, feel like going out on a summer night. And so that whole part of the process, and as I said, and the whole thing of the ongoing training, I think that's crucial. We need the training, and we want it. So they seem to know that. But going back to the course itself, yeah, as I said, the fact that I remember Hal after all these years, just made you feel that you were going to go about it the right way. And then the other thing was, I said this to other volunteers that I've worked with. Well, we were painting benches in the park Saturday. That's right. I don't do housework. I said, step back and look at what you've done. Don't always look at what you think you need or want to do. And just step back. And I don't care what the project is. And people will kind of pause for a minute and say, yeah, you're right. And then my other feeling is, and I said that to the library friends groups, it's not a competition. It's better to do the 5 trees and have it all manageable than not. The other thing that we have, as I mentioned about the water department, and I think it's rather rich, that I have a picture of my husband, a retired, 37 years water commissioner for, 12 or whatever, and there he is helping tag trees at the Navy Yard. And of course, they mitigate stormwater runoff, but it's wonderful. Again, it was just for that brief time with the water department people. Now, and those fellows who are there now, no, he wasn't there then, but I always take them aside and let them know. And it's that kind of connection with people. And when you're in this 1.5 million size city, that doesn't always happen. And now with the whole issue of electronic gadgets, I mean, in children and adults, et cetera, and again, about being connected. And for instance, when we go out, when we have the cruise together and we're having we're having 5 high school students from George Washington Carver School of Engineering and Science, and this is where this the head of the group for the planting, Ray, teaches. In fact, he teaches urban environment. So one of his students, and then 4 students who are honor students, are going to be coming out. And last year he told me one of his students was planting with a group in that student's neighborhood. So this kind of outreach to the young people, but also, I mean, this is a student from another part of the city. And what I have told the Philly U students, and I'll be telling these students, when you plant a tree, you are connected to that community in a very special way. And I said, I said, if your parents come to visit, come and show them the trees you planted on Warden Drive. And but I know that I would have loved when I lived in D.C. And it's funny, I took a picture of a street tree out of my 3rd floor apartment window back in the early 60s. I mean, I didn't realize, but getting back to it, I would have loved if on a Saturday to have gone to do something like that. So with
Cynthia, a little point of clarification. So these students from George Washington Carver came here for Arbor Day or for...
No, they're going to come Saturday.
Oh.
Yeah, they're going to come Saturday.
And Saturdays when you
Plant trees.
Here.
Yeah. Okay. And also for clarification, though, Sue Park last year the retired chemistry teacher. She didn't teach at Lankenau, but anyway, she knew a program there. Last year, students from Lankenau helped out, and they really helped out. I mean, they worked hard and they did a great job at our Arbor Day celebration. So with that, yeah. And talking about students, I mentioned about the book for every teacher. Okay. I guess 5 years ago, I came up with the idea that we give a book to every 8th grader from Mifflin for graduation. And what I didn't, and many of them would have gone to our Arbor Day programs as children and would have gone on the trips that we sponsor. And as I said, they're the next planters. And so the book I've been giving, she's one of my heroines, is Unbowed, the memoir by Wangray Maitai. And we agreed within the group, we wanted to give the students a grown-up book. And that even if they didn't read it now, it's their book. And one year when I did it, and they had me that year on the stage handing out the books, and we do a book plate, of course, I realized for some of the students that was the only present, which never crossed my mind. I mean, I was thinking of getting the book plates in the book and being there on time and all that. So, but that's just an example of when people do become a tree tender. Because I'm going to go back to PHS, you feel you have this, I'll say, ability. You look at something and say, well, maybe we should do that, i.e. the books for the 8th graders. Or in Alice's case, the Arbor Day celebration. There's something empowering about the way PHS, as I said, has the different classes, some of which I said didn't exist years ago, like the pruning. And then also if you need advice, you can pick up the phone and call someone and say, look, this, whether it's about a tree or some minor issue or something, they will be there for you. And that's just so important. I mean, it's so important. And so that's trying to think of, I know I mentioned about City Hall. Oh, the other thing is, and maybe it's just because it gave me another opportunity to talk, but our then Councilman Nigel Nutter introduced a bill in City Council. Mayor Rendell was mayor, and at that time was my husband's boss. And this was April 30th, 1997. And it was Bill 960826, an ordinance amending, quote-unquote, street trees, Section 15-203 City Code. And Councilman Nutter introduced it. So there would be funding to take down dead trees. I forget how many they had, but this is going back to, so it may not sound, they should be planting trees instead. No, you take down the dead ones. And every tree tender understands that. And initially, the mayor was against the bill. There was testimony in city council. I testified on behalf of East Falls tree tenders. And eventually the bill passed unanimously with Mayor Rendell's endorsement. But the tree tenders were there, and they were polite. We were and so there is Jack wife, Alice's husband, Alice, me, Mindy, and then this is Alexis that I met in '95 in class, and then she with two other men started Friends with Michael Park, which I'm really involved in. In fact, going back to what comes out of it, people who love trees tend to love parks and vice versa. Well, it was Tree Tenders' 15th anniversary, and then the 20th for Tree Tenders, and we celebrated together. And when we did it 2 years ago, again having to do with the dates, it was their 25th, I guess, and our 20th. That's it. It would have been 95 or 2015 rather. We did it at McMichael Park. There was a new person hired on to the park department. Came to a meeting, and we looked outdoors at the park and how we go about it. Well, they were doing the tree giveaways. So here you had the two community groups celebrating together, working with Parks and Rec, because they were the ones, or the tree giveaway, with Penn Hort Society. And the TD Bank, I think, is the one who helps fund that project. And that is actually where TD Bank wanted to do the photo op with the check that they were giving to Parks. But it's about the collaboration. It's about the collaboration. The other thing that we did that is in the park, and again, it was collaboration, couldn't have happened. Lori Hayes, I mean, I could rattle off names of people in Parks and Rec. I mean, I did my homework, and Mayor Rendell was also then became governor, and he lives in East Falls. Well, he was not the first governor from the neighborhood, because Thomas Mifflin, the very first governor. So I proposed to our group, I said, what if we get the okay from the park? Because you have to get, which is appropriate, to plant a tree in his honor for being the first mayor from East Falls, and then comment that he was. And so the group went for it, and then I went to the park people, and they really worked with me, and I was able to raise a bit of money for the tree. And so if you were to go McMichael Park, but it would not have happened with that collaboration, because it was the park that had arranged to get the right stone for the plaque and install that stone. I mean, that stone hasn't wobbled, since it's been done. So again, it's about the city and PHS, and then the volunteers collaborating. And one thing I think with any organization, though, if you've been involved in it a long time, you have to be able to step back and not make it sound as if this is the way we always did it. And but I mean, I think within our group, and I think even if Mindy thought there was something, she would take me aside, and I would want that. In fact, when I met somebody new with the city that came in a couple of years ago and said, what if we met so she could, Erica, she's in charge of the Tree Philly program now. And I said, what if we met, and maybe even somebody else, to let her know kind of who we are and who we aren't, because this was something new to her. And we met. And then what I did later, after I got to know her a little bit, I called her up one day and said, if you think I'm going about things in a way that is not a good way, just give me a call. Because sometimes we all know there are things in your personal life, or you're coming down with the flu, and you can just have a tone of voice or make a phone call that maybe, or send an email that later on you wish you didn't do it. And I'd rather be called up on that. But as I said, this is the whole thing. I know the word I didn't use is accessibility with PHS, and then and accessibility and evolving. So.
Cynthia, what is your current role? Do you have a role with the tree tenders? Are you the
coordinator?
That's right,
Yeah, I'm the coordinator.
Not the president.
No, no, we're a small group of 12 people.
And has that number fluctuated over time?
Yeah, we've been smaller. And we were at our largest in the early days. But see, again, now Alexis doesn't live in East Falls anymore, but no one in her case wants to step up to be head of McMichael Park Friends. But it's just that people are so busy with other things, and with the young families. Like next door, they have a daughter in high school, a son in middle school, and a son in elementary, and the mother works and the dad works. And it's this way throughout the city. And so this is, it's a challenge, I think, for every group. And I see it when I go to the tree committee meeting downtown. And see, now this is something else. They started that tree tender committee at PHS about, I would say, 7 years ago. Mindy can confirm the date. And that was, see, now here again, so we meet, I think it's 4 times a year. Maybe it's 6, but I think it's 4. And you have people from different tree tender groups around the city. And so we have an agenda. You send out your ideas and all of that. And when I'm at that meeting, and I do see some of these younger people, and the whole thing, like one fellow, the baby's 3 months old, and there he was at the meeting. I'm thinking, his neighborhood is lucky, but this is, the personal responsibilities are a real challenge for any volunteer group to grow. I mean, but I said, and we're so fortunate talking about neighborhood support. A couple who took tree tender training. They didn't have children yet. In fact, he was with the water department. She was with DEP.
What's DEP?
Department of Environmental Protection. Sorry. And so you needed tools, right? Well, we were able to, I guess, somehow raise money to get tools, and we had tools personally. But then the tools that belonged to the group, where do you store them? He approached his church, East Falls Presbyterian Church, in their storeroom. That's where our tools are. Once through PHS, there was a grant program. We could buy some more tools. And lo and behold, we had all these tools now. Well, one of our members, again, because of his business, he can't be involved anymore. But George said, these tools are just piling up. We should have tool racks. We got permission from the church. We have tool racks. What was I doing on my birthday Friday? Stopped by the church because we lend our tools for community projects. So there was the Arboretum cleanup at Mifflin every year. They borrow our tools, and if they break something or lose something, they replace it. I don't have to. They have a check-off list, and they check them out, check them in. Once there was a cleanup at the library, we lent the tools. Why not? So this is what happens with tree tender groups. If you're fortunate enough to have some of the resources that we have, and we don't take them for granted. I mean, and when I go downtown to the meeting, and I know for others, they have a lot of challenges in terms of having the tools and storing them. And like in this case, we only have to climb 2 steps to get into the building to get the tools. We don't have to go down to a basement. And as I said, but no one in our group, like Ray, who's chair of this planting, takes it for granted. And, that is the other side. Now, last fall, planted trees. I worked with Penn Charter School, and we were able to plant some street trees on the Oak Road, 2, I guess it was. Guess who our volunteers were? The wrestling team. I mean, you sort of just assume it would have been the environmental club, but how it ever turned out, it was the wrestling team that nothing against the environmental club, but the idea that the wrestling team, it's planting trees. So these are the things that have grown out of it. And I'm sure tree tenders across the city have, they have all their stories with that too. But yeah, so we've been very fortunate. And if a group were to ask me for advice, I think it would be do your homework. Don't tackle more than you can handle. Keep up with your training with PHS. And make sure that you're reaching out as much as you can to all parts of your community. I mean, for instance, I didn't see reaching out to the bank. To me, it was something, we really could use the money for the books. But it built a connection with the people at the bank. And so this is what comes out of it. But I would definitely say to people, don't feel the learning has ended after you've taken that first class. And I don't feel that is the attitude of any tree tenders I've met on that part. The only thing I would encourage them to do is do have the handout, because, as I said, it says who you are and who you aren't, who you're associated with, and as time goes on, it's you're remembering what grant you got when, or what special project, what year it happened, something that was unusual. You've got your history.
Is that, I didn't see the timeline of this is a few facts.
Yeah.
Grants, awards.
Yeah, we've gotten some awards. But as I said, it also, if you meet somebody, it's like, did I tell them this? Do I tell them that? You can just hand it to them. And thanks to computers, I can update it. It's that part of it I would do. And then the other thing I would say is let your local state reps and everybody on city council know what you're doing. And all it takes is just having that one email list and the one note. And I've been in situations where a councilman or someone from his staff has come up to me and knew me. And it was because of this kind of outreach. And it puts, they do have so much. I wouldn't want to be a council person to deal with. But when they see this happening in a community, in their district, they might then see, maybe this other neighborhood would be interested. It's giving them something to share. I mean, and again, with the internet, it's really very easy. I mean, I find it funny that someone my age is saying that, but that part of it. So yeah, that's...
And it's good news. It's good news that they can brag about.
Yes. Well, okay, the other one I've said, back to my Friends of the Free Library Day. People who belong to any kind of friends or community group not are just people who care about their community and the city. They're people who vote. They're people who vote. And I do find that disturbing when I see low voter turnout with any age group, but particularly with the younger people. Because don't complain about the policies or the lack of funding for this or that if you haven't voted, and that's the first step of making your voice heard, is to vote. And so yeah, but no, I think Philadelphia is very lucky, though, as I said, going back to Parks and Rec and staff that I've known from there, and the relationships, and it's just been really good. It's just been very good.
Cynthia, I have another question. I think you started to answer it, but I might have got you off the track. What's the relationship between Arbor Day and PHS and your local Arbor Day? Did you start it?
Alice started it. Alice Rife started it. It was her idea in '96. And I said, gee, we never celebrated that in Connecticut, but I know what it is. And at this point, I knew about, Morton, the fellow, it's Sterling Morton, or Martin Sterling, anyway, who started it out in Nebraska. And the minute she said it, it made utter sense to me. And again, talking about the outreach, she had the idea to contact the senior club at St. Bridget's Church, and those volunteers were the ones who did the plants, passed out the plants. Again, this whole thing, you didn't have to be a tree tender to volunteer at Arbor Day. But yeah, so that part has really worked out very well. And
what is PHS's role in Arbor Day? Or is there one?
They don't have a direct one. Mindy, in the past, in the early days, came and did an activity, and then she just got so overbooked. She is coming this year. She comes whenever she can, but she comes as a guest. And like, for instance, when Erica was starting out at Parks and Rec as to be head of Tree Philly, she's now retired, Joan Blaustein brought her, because Joan and I had said, yes, it's one thing to see the program in your office. It's another thing to see it through your own eyes, what is happening. And anybody of any age that I've met agrees with that. So that's the other side of it. It gives people opportunity to see how you can do it. And like maybe another group could do an Arbor Day. They don't have to do it the way we do it. But one thing, though, that I realized, and I was at the podium and I looked, that this is probably the only gathering where the children from all the schools are in the same place. Not that they directly interact, but they're all sharing the same place and they're all participating in the same activities. And so that I, to me is just a bonus for everybody. And then the other thing is safety. Yes, I contacted the 39th Police District. We have an officer, so when Mifflin is crossing, when the school buses come in, and now they have the officer to stay through the whole thing, just in case I need them. Okay, children need to use the bathroom sometimes. Alice went to the fire department next door and got permission. I mean, the teachers try to take care of that before the children come, but there's always the possibility. But see, that's Alice from the get-go. I mean, she just started out addressing all the things that needed to be addressed, and I thought, oh my, yeah, it's pretty remarkable, though. She's a talented seamstress. And now she isn't sewing anymore, but okay, I think.
And this Saturday, what is that a tree tender event?
Yeah, it's a PHS tree tender planting. 785 trees will be planted throughout the city area.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I see.
Yeah.
On that day.
Yeah. And the trees are arriving, today's Tuesday, they'll be arriving at the Navy Yard tomorrow. And then the tree tender groups sign up for a time to go and pick up the trees.
And what time will you, because I'd like to come by.
Oh, this would be wonderful. Okay, we meet at the church at 9:30, and it's at Midvale and Vaux. For East Falls Presbyterian.
Okay. And then walk me through what happens.
Okay, and Ray and Ed probably Friday will get there and put plastic down over the carpeting in the hallway. Then in the morning at 9:30, it's we'll get the crew leaders will get there a little bit earlier, and then the volunteers are to be there at 9:30, and we already have the crews assigned to the different addresses, and then the crew leaders, and then Ray will provide go to the volunteers and saying, well, okay, you'll be with this group, you'll be with that leader, et cetera, and then you go to the site. Now, one place we're doing 10 trees is Carlton Park Apartments, which takes up just about a whole block of Midvale Avenue, just below Wissahickon. In other words, it's the next block up, and it goes from Queen Lane along McMichael Street to Midvale Avenue. Where we're going to, we've already done 22 trees for them on the Midvale side. This time it's going to be on the Queen Lane side. We're doing 10. In fact, that's where I'll be with one of the crews. So we'll have probably 3 crews there. The other thing that
and that's Midvale and...
Yeah, Queen Lane.
Midvale,
it'll be the 3,000 block of Queen Lane.
Okay, great.
So you have that. The other thing that we do, and I think I have it here, and we learned in tree tender training about how much water a tree needed, right?
Yes.
Well, I didn't offer you anything to drink. Would you like some cranberry juice or orange juice?
Oh, that's okay. Thank you, Cynthia. I'm
Sorry,
fine.
it should have been there.
No,
Oh, there's the bucket. Oh, a couple of years ago we had enough money and we got these.
Oh, nice. Very nice.
And it's very practical in terms of carrying some of the things that we carry.
Mm-hmm.
And then I realized, I don't know what year I started doing it, but it's been since forever, that we learn in tree tender training to make some holes in the bucket.
Mm-hmm.
And then you put the bucket next to the tree and fill it 3 times. So the tree gets 15 gallons of water if it hasn't rained an inch or more that week. And so what I'll be doing, I label each bucket for your PHS, Plant 1 Million Tree Vitalized Tree from East Falls Tree Tenders. And then when it hasn't rained, I send a reminder to people for the first 2 years because people are busy. They're not necessarily good at measuring the rain. So we do that. And then years and years ago when we had the idea of planting trees along the retaining wall of Mifflin School, and so there's the sidewalk along Midvale, and this would have been between the sidewalk and the retaining wall, long green strip. And there had been some trees there, and maybe there still were a couple. But I realized if we planted trees there, it makes it really hard for the guys mowing the lawn. So they're maneuvering around. So I did some research and found this, and I bought one. And then I called up Joe Toohey from Parks and Rec and say, Joe, I want to show you something. What do you think? And this is why. And he said, go for it.
So would you describe what that is?
It is a tree guard, which is pliable, heavy-duty plastic. And the way it is made, if the base of the tree is really quite large or has bumps, you can hook up one to you can expand it by hooking one to the other. And so we do that. And the other reason we do it is weed whackers. We have a couple of trees that will not get to live their full life, I know. Because when I go for a walk, I try to look the other way because I just wince, where weed whackers really do damage. So this is the other reason. And the other thing that I do, when we have the information from PHS about caring for the tree, but it doesn't have the species. So, the tree tag will, but I have a handout, and so it tells the person what the species is and just the basics, because I think if you have too much information to read, then people say, I'll read it later and never do. So it's the height, the crown width, the flowers, if there are some, color in the fall, and then the other thing is a link if they want to learn more. And then there's instructions on watering. But one of the things I did when we still had the falls, or is it? I did an article called How to Kill a Street Tree, or Why the Lifespan of a Street Tree is 7 years. That has changed, by the way. This was for 2000 August in the fall, so this is 18. And so I began with, do not water your new tree. And then I go on, even though it needs, antidote. Then should you decide to water your tree, if possible, skip the hose and watering can. Place 2 5-gallon, and then I go on how to do it. And then about ivy. Let ivy and other vines grow and grow and grow to the point the tree is green from head to toe. Then come spring, no buds will burst, and branch by branch the tree will die. So then I have an antidote about that. fill your tree pit with bricks and stones and or concrete slabs. And then I go, then murderous mulching, the volcano mulching. So I tackle that. And then I had great freedom of the press. When all else fails, one might consider parking illegally on the sidewalk and putting one's vehicle into reverse. Antidote, none. And then I had information, the American Forest Service. Now that we have a newspaper, and I, went downtown and to the tree tender meeting, and they're doing talking about partners. American Forest Service has become a very strong partner of PHS, and their professionals are getting all the data from tree tenders. And one thing I've failed to mention, again, this is evolving and this is PHS. We do tree checking every summer of the trees we planted with kind of a report card. And we try to connect with the owner because it's much more effective if the owner can be with you when you're checking the tree. And then they get the handouts about what to do differently and what they are doing right. I mean, and again, it's very clear cut. It's not 42 pages. And all that data, and the survival of trees, survival of which species, goes to the American Forest. And then we had a presentation this past year with that data. And it is astounding what they're doing. So again, I'm glad I did think of that because this is talking about PHS and the partnering. So no, they don't have the staff to do that, but this is what American Forest is for. I mean, they're glad to have the data so they can provide this. So yeah, but see, this is what I mean about PHS. And American Forest Service, this wasn't something I was really aware of. I knew it was there, but the idea that they would collect our data. So it's great because it's going back to seeing the survival rate of certain species and some problems that you never even were aware of, or So that, as I said, another example of PHS, and I guess I use the word evolving. So.
Oh, Cynthia, this is.
I wore you out.
No, it's terrific. I'm thinking of you say. It's woven all throughout the stories, but just as our.
You can have all these.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Yep.
Tell me, as a result of PHS, what can you say about their legacy in terms of your involvement in East Falls Tree Tenders?
Well, in terms of myself, I had no idea what I would do in a retirement. And I hadn't sat down one day and made a list, but just as I mentioned, it was serendipitous in '95 that I learned about being a tour guide at the City Hall, and I learned I was interested in architecture and ultimately ended, doing all those articles. And the very same thing with tree tenders. And as I mentioned to you, I picked my college because of the green. But you have to have people who are engaged because, again, the city is never going to have enough staff. But going back to it, because of my involvement with the Friends group, I already knew of the personal benefit of that interaction, working for the common good of your community. And now with climate change, my goodness, you feel you're part of some really big picture, but getting back to it, going back to your community and that interaction, and the fact that I'm 77 and I'm going to be planting trees with high school students. It's what I say, everybody wins. And we have a small Italian restaurant, and we went there for my birthday Friday night. And Saturday, I knew I'd be working in the community garden in the morning. I knew I'd be painting benches in the afternoon. I knew I'd be out marking tree pits later today. And we've gone there in the past. And a bottom line was somehow the owner chef knew it was my birthday. And when I had my dessert of chocolate mousse, they brought it out with whipped cream and a candle. 2 waiters did, and singing happy birthday to me, and everybody all right. And someone said, make a wish. And I said, well, I wish when you're 77, you have as wonderful as a birthday. But I didn't mean just that moment. I was looking forward to working the community garden. Again, PHS. There's another, we wouldn't have that community garden without PHS. And I was looking forward to painting benches in the park. I mean, that was with Parks and Rec, but I mean, it's that involvement. And I had no idea I'd be able to have that, and it wouldn't be possible if you didn't have PHS establishing these programs and developing these programs. I mean, that's the other side of it. And I'll give you another example with PHS. Parks and Rec, after a few years and whatnot, we had the Recreation Department and Fairmount Park. The trees were under Fairmount Park. The two departments merged. And tree tenders had different concerns about the thing, again, about relationships. And Mike DeBerardinis, who's now managing director, but he was head of rec department years ago, then went to be head of DCNR at the state with Rendell. And then he was to be the first head of the joint units. He came to our tree committee meeting. And ahead of time, Mindy said, send in your questions. Send in your questions, because some of us may have the same questions. So that's PHS. I mean, it isn't, they have the idea and they follow through on it, but they go about it in a very thorough, sensible fashion. I mean, I never feel when I go to a tree committee meeting, I wish I were home with a good book. I want to go to those meetings because I know I'm going to learn something I can bring back. And they, as I said, past and current staff, but I mean, the tree tender program is under Mindy, but I mean, I'm thinking of Dana and her predecessor. They really seemed great at doing that. And I mentioned the late Joy Lawrence, what she did for us. And so I don't think they have time to think about it, but I don't think the staff has any idea of the impact that they have made collectively and individually, and also being good role models, whether it's for the leaders of the groups or the volunteers who come to help that day. And I'm going to go back to the things with the safety. We are to do PA1 call. That's what I'm doing this afternoon. I'll be doing PA1 call, which is, it's a law, call before you dig. And if you're a property owner, there is no cost to it. If you're a developer, you have to be registered. Well, I started doing it years ago, and now we're instructed to do it now at PHS. And because it's the tree tender program, we don't have to pay a registration fee to do this. And at least 3 days before you dig in front of your property, you call, and then they notify all the utilities. And in the meantime, you've marked where your tree is going to be planted, so they know. In fact, I even got permission to go out with somebody from the gas works and gas PGW, and I said, well, look, this is how we mark our pits. Do you think that's a good way? Because rather than just doing a little mark at the curb, I said, because cars can block. But that's what I mean. With PHS, they don't just tell you, be careful. They're very specific about it. And and the same thing with the volunteer waiver. I called up. I knew Mimi and Dana were up in New York tagging trees, but I called and got to their volunteer unit yesterday. Person picked up the phone. I was not put on hold, and which has to happen sometimes anyway. And said, "This is who I am. This is why I'm calling. We have 4 high school students coming, and the teacher wants to get the waiver forms to the parents because they have to." She immediately, within 3 minutes, emailed me as an attachment the waiver form. Then I could send it to the teacher who could get it to the parents. But that's PHS. I mean, they really, and obviously they have the waiver form. So so going back personally is my connection to the community and the whole interaction with people of different ages. And also, I like learning. I don't always learn everything I should, probably, but I like learning. And so going back to PHS with that, and then as I said, now with climate change, people can feel, what can we do? What can we do? Well, the tree tenders across the country are doing something. they're doing something. And so that, I think, psychologically is very heartening. And said whether you're older or younger, that part of it, which has evolved out of it. But yeah, but going down this, as I said to the students, come back to Philly or Jefferson and take a walk and see how the trees have grown that you planted. Yeah. So that's, as I said, that whole thing of connection and learning and just fun. Just fun.
That's terrific. Thank you. This is wonderful. Great stories. Wonderful stories.
If you go on, did I send you the link to where Alice and Sue Harrison, who did our database, God bless her, and I were interviewed by a student from, very quickly, a few years ago, 5 years ago maybe now, PHS approached me and other people that a professor at Temple in a film course wanted the students to go out and interview volunteers and do a short little thing. So we went to PHS, pair, guy and a gal, were assigned to our group. So they came here, and I said to Mindy, of course, it has to be some other people. And I suggested the names, and she agreed with me because I thought the Arbor Day, and then with Sue, and Sue was also very articulate, and definitely the work shoveling, but doing the database. So I thought, and I remember I was sitting there, Alice was in that chair, Sue was on the couch, and this young boy, he was the one who kind of was doing the questioning. We did not meet before. And when I saw that video afterwards, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm not going to tell you about it because you'll understand. And I said, well, if you were to Google his name, it's John, Jon, then Raistno, John. About a year or so ago, there was a big article about him in the Inquirer and his going on with his film career. But I couldn't believe for something, because I've interviewed people, how with the three of us not being, he read a little bit about what we did, but it wasn't like his mother had been a tree tender or something. It just was really astounding. But I think you would find it interesting because I would like you to hear Alice that I talk about and Sue, because you're just getting this one view from me, and it'll give you, and then the other thing, but it's not on anymore, is something was called The Truth About Trees. And tree tenders were to write like one page about why you're a tree tender and your connection with trees. And then it would be taped. People came in from the Midwest. I remember the two women doing it, I had them over here so they could take a walk and see some of the street trees and get a sense, because they weren't Philadelphians. And one was from the Midwest, and I forget where the other one was from. So anyway, when we went, so we were to meet at downtown and at PHS, all the different with our sheet of paper, our one piece. Well, we're going around the table. Well, they wanted to do it right then and there. So you only had your one. Not all of us did it that way. I went along with it because people were freezing up. And I said, okay, I'll go. And I went over and sat, and they did it and read it. That one isn't on anymore, but I think this other one, because you're getting the other two people in it, the other one, I mean, it's great they did that, what I'm saying is, but for your purposes and getting a sense of the group and the different personalities and the different skills that they bring to it, that his really shows that. But I said to Kumar, if you had told me with tree tenders, and I will say this, the tapes, this is none.
No, it is.
Oh.
No, that's good.
Oh, dear. No, I have gotten awards, and one was from Senator Hughes, a woman who works part-time at the school, Linda Norris, a Falzer, and she's out in the playground with the kids. She's in the cafeteria, in the lunchroom. That's her area, helping the school. She came across this thing for nominating, and she went to the principal at the time that I should be nominated because of this stuff with the kids. Then we have something called Town Watch. And a few years ago, I got a certificate. East Falls Community Council sometimes acknowledges someone. That happened a number of years ago. And quite a few years ago, I got one. When PH did this, I got one from PHS. And Alice did too. I mean, I see again, they're really paying attention because they've got, now with so many tree tender groups and of knowing, but this is, what people are giving. And we all want to do it. But, when somebody gets a certificate like that or is acknowledged, it's very nice for that person's family and friends because they say, oh, well, you work so hard at this. None of us does it for an award. But it is nice, and I'm not going to say no. I won't accept it. For heavens, that's my dad would have said false modesty. I mean, no, I'm very appreciative, but yeah. So this whole thing of being acknowledged, and one thing I do wish other communities had, but things are changing with the whole newspaper business. It is a shame with not having neighborhood newspapers because each group can't get coverage in the Philadelphia Inquirer for what it does. But if they get it in their neighborhood, because this was the review. I'm just letting you see what we've gotten. Oh, and then that was the other thing. I'll spare you the story of the Polonia. That was, but I was able to help get the. Well, okay, no, I will tell you the story of the Polonia. We had a championship tree that somebody in the community nominated, was on the list, the Polonia in the park. And I was going to be applying for my tree tender grant for tree tenders. And Alexis, who was head of the park, had just awful lot of things going on in her life with family and parents and whatnot. So anyway, I said to her, and I approached the group, I said, what if I write the grant to get the Polonia braced? Because I checked with somebody if that was a possibility to prolong its life. So I got the approval from everybody. I sent in 2 grants, and I used to get 2,000. Well, I got 1,000 for tree tenders and 1,000 for the Polonia. And I called up, there was still Councilman Nutter, was that long ago. And Julia Chapman said, well, Cynthia, it's a limit to what he gives to each group. I said, that's totally understandable. In other words, we're the same group. So, okay, that's the way it was. Well, then I had to get estimates. Hal Rosner, still with Bartlett. And so it was Bartlett and 2 others. And then I called Hal afterwards. I said, how could I have, I need the estimate so I can move forward on this. And he said, well, Cynthia, what if we do it for free if you get the word out? So I didn't have to take a vote on that one. So he's going to do it for free, saying that. Well, then I had that $1,000. So I went back to the city and say, look, the $1,000 that I asked for, the work is being done pro bono. Can it be then moved to the grant for the children in the school? But you should always follow the rules. If you say the money is for this, that you don't assume because it's a worthy cause or anything else. And that, but people in tree tenders, that's how they are. I mean, whether it's the local people, whatever, of course you go through the proper procedures and all of that. But showing the support that we've got. So that was, something else. Oh, what I was saying is with PHS, if any group has a new idea about a project or outreach, they are there to listen to you and support you with that. It is their approachability, I feel, generates creativity and responsibility. And that isn't necessarily always the case with a large organization. But with PHS, it's always fertile ground. So I'm glad I did mention that. That's